A humble girl walked into the millionaire CEO's office thinking it was a job interview. He should have sent her away. But instead, he was captivated, and she won his heart. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Lena Russell, at 36, stood at the edge of the bustling lobby in a towering Manhattan building. Her brown hair, cut just above her shoulders, clung to her cheeks in the morning humidity as she clutched a slightly worn folder holding her resume. Determination mixed with apprehension in her eyes. She had been job hunting for several months and could almost feel every penny slip away each time she paid rent for her modest apartment in Queens. A receptionist job here, if she got it, would mean the start of something better, or at least stable enough to keep her afloat. Floor 22, she whispered, studying the scrap of paper with the address. She stepped inside a sleek elevator, anxious about the sharply dressed people crowding in. Suits, polished shoes, perfectly pressed blouses, everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged. Lena pressed the button she believed corresponded to her destination, yet in her distracted state, she never realized she had hit the wrong one. When the elevator opened, she hurried out onto an elegant executive floor. The contrast between her simple navy skirt and the shimmering marble floor made her painfully aware that this place felt too grand. Still, she thought her interview might be in a decent office. This was New York, after all. Perhaps every hallway here gleamed under expensive lighting. With a cautious step, she made her way to a frosted glass door labeled CEO, Ryan Sullivan. That seemed odd for a receptionist interview, but the woman at the front desk was absent, so Lena assumed the company might run interviews from anywhere available. Heart pounding, she gripped the door handle and walked into a plush, spacious office. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city skyline, and designer furniture sat across polished floors. A large, modern table was surrounded by several individuals, including a tall man standing near the head of the table with an air of authority. His gaze flicked toward her, grey-green eyes that seemed both intense and distant. He was in the middle of a business conversation when Lena stepped in. "May I help you?" he asked, arching an eyebrow. The question sounded neither hostile nor friendly, just firm. Lena swallowed. I'm here for an interview," she said, voice trembling slightly. Her cheeks grew hot as she noticed every set of eyes turning on her. "Receptionist," she clarified. Something in her mind insisted something was off, yet she pressed on. "I might be a little early. I'm Lena Russell." For a fleeting second, the man, Ryan Sullivan, glanced at his colleague, Trevor Neal, a man in his mid-40s with sharp features and silvering hair at the temples. Trevor looked both puzzled and annoyed. Around them, two other staff members stood in confusion, waiting to see how their CEO would respond to this unexpected interruption. Ryan lifted a hand to pause the meeting. "An interview for a receptionist position." "You're not quite in the right place," he said carefully, his tone calmer than Lena expected. She froze, mouth slightly open. Oh, goodness, I apologize," she stammered. "I must have taken the wrong elevator. I was directed to the 22nd floor, but maybe—" Her voice drifted off as she flushed red. Adrenaline coursed through her, and she felt an urge to run back to the hallway. This was humiliating. Over the last few years, she'd faced enough setbacks to fill a lifetime. The last thing she needed was more embarrassment in front of a group of executives. As she shifted to leave, Ryan's gaze softened, something in her apologetic expression catching his attention. "Hold on," he said. "No need to rush out." He turned to the others in the room. "Give me just a minute, please." They exchanged surprised looks, but he nodded firmly, and Trevor reluctantly led them out into the corridor, leaving Lena and Ryan alone. Her heart thudded in her chest, certain she'd derailed this man's important meeting, but beneath her panic she saw no anger on his face, only curiosity. Folding her hands tightly over her resume, Lena steadied her breath. She had no idea that this simple mistake, a single wrong button pressed in the elevator, would become a door opening onto a life she never imagined. And standing before her, Ryan Sullivan, the CEO of Sullivan Holdings, could not have guessed how this unplanned visitor would soon transform everything he thought he knew about himself and his world. Ryan studied Lena with an intensity that made her shift on her feet. She wanted to melt into the polished floor. The hum of the city traffic below, faintly audible through the glass wall, underscored the odd quietness now filling the office. Moments ago, a high-level discussion about mergers and market strategy had consumed this space. Now, all of it seemed paused, as if suspended by this unplanned encounter. Lena swallowed hard. "I really am sorry to interrupt," she began. She held out her resume, its edges a little frayed from constant handling. "I was looking for the HR department. They told me to go to 22, so I might have made a mistake." "You did," Ryan said, his voice low and calm. "But you also caught my attention. Please, sit." He gestured to one of the sleek chairs around the table. His charcoal grey suit, impeccably tailored, only magnified her sense of being out of place in her simple blouse and skirt. Still, she felt compelled to follow his instruction. It wasn't every day that a CEO asked you to sit down, especially after barging into his meeting unannounced. She eased into the chair, trying to ignore the dryness in her throat. Ryan leaned against the table's edge, arms crossed. "What's your name again?" "Lena Russell," she repeated, forcing herself to meet his eyes. She couldn't decipher what flickered there, pity, curiosity, or some guarded intrigue. He reached for the resume she offered, scanning it wordlessly. She had only a few bullet points to show: administrative experience in small offices, a high school diploma, a night course in basic computer skills. None of it shouted top-tier candidate, and certainly nothing indicated she belonged in this high-rise corporate empire. Trevor Neal reappeared at the door, eyebrows tight with impatience. Ryan gave him a slight nod, as if signaling he needed more time. Trevor lingered, glancing between them. Lena's cheeks warmed again, feeling like she'd sparked some silent contention between these two men. "I must have taken up enough of your time," she said, voice trembling. I can go downstairs and find the right person, really." Her insecurities gnawed at her. She pictured a younger version of herself, always apologizing for being in the wrong place or saying the wrong thing. Ryan closed the resume and studied her face. "You've worked mostly in small businesses, correct?" She nodded. "Do you like that environment, or were you looking for a bigger challenge?" The question jarred her. Nobody ever asked her about her preferences. Usually, interviews stuck to standard questions: availability, wage expectations, references. I want to learn," she managed. "I need stability, sure, but I also want a place I can grow." "Earn a real chance." Ryan inhaled softly, as though weighing her words. A short hush fell between them. Behind him, Manhattan's skyline glimmered in the morning light. Trevor hovered in the background, arms folded, impatience carved on his brow. Yet Ryan didn't rush. He pressed his lips together thoughtfully. "Miss Russell," he said, "the position you're describing is on a different floor, yes, but I can't help noticing there's something genuine about you." She blinked, uncertain how to respond. Genuine? Why? Because she was stammering and honest about messing up. Trevor finally cleared his throat. "Ryan, we do need to wrap up that conference call with London, remember?" Ryan nodded slowly, never taking his eyes off Lena. "Sure, Miss Russell, if you'd like, leave your contact details with my secretary. She's Nancy, at reception out there. Let HR know you accidentally landed here." But he paused, a faint smile edging his lips. Sometimes mistakes happen for a reason. Her chest fluttered. She rose from the chair, swallowing the last of her nerves. "Thank you," she managed softly. As she moved toward the door, Trevor's stern gaze followed her. Ryan, however, wore an expression she couldn't fully decode, a mixture of intrigue and gentleness, as though he'd just stumbled on something unexpected and wasn't sure what to do with it. In the corridor, Nancy smiled warmly at Lena, offering a clipboard for her to jot down phone and email. Lena's mind spun as she wrote, grappling with 1,000 questions. She couldn't know that, in that brief silence, when Ryan Sullivan considered her humble resume and hesitant words. A silent bond had begun to form, and it would only grow stronger from here. Stepping out of the sleek corporate tower onto the crowded sidewalk, Lena felt a swirl of emotions. Relief, embarrassment, a strange flicker of hope. She couldn't quite pass them all. She hurried past the throngs of people and over to a nearby bench, where she sank down, letting the cool morning breeze brush over her flushed face. Why hadn't Ryan Sullivan just dismissed her? That single question bounced around her head. She fiddled with the business card Nancy had given her. She'd apologized profusely when she realized she was on the wrong floor. Yet Ryan, of all people, seemed oddly interested. Or was she just imagining that? After all, CEOs didn't typically halt important meetings to chat with random job applicants who stumbled into their offices. A sudden buzz from her phone pulled her attention. A text from her friend Maggie popped up. "Any luck at the interview?" Lena exhaled, typed a quick, "I'll explain later," and looked again at the imposing building behind her. She wondered if her bizarre run-in would lead to anything, or just end up as a quirky anecdote about the day she nearly crashed a high-level meeting. Meanwhile, high above, in his expansive office, Ryan Sullivan closed the door behind Trevor. He lingered beside the large glass window, arms loosely folded, scanning the street as if he might catch a glimpse of Lena in the sea of pedestrians below. Something about her candid manner stayed with him, her uncertain smile, her honest mention of needing a real chance. He'd built Sullivan Holdings from an inheritance and a sharp business mind. Yet, behind the power suits and relentless schedules, he often felt a nagging emptiness. He'd become adept at hiding it, even from himself. But it wasn't just Ryan wrestling with thoughts of Lena. Trevor Neal, CFO and longtime confidant, questioned Ryan's reaction. "You're not really thinking of pursuing this, are you?" Trevor asked, scanning through digital reports on his tablet. "She's obviously not an ideal candidate for any upper-level role. We have better uses of time." Ryan responded with a curt shrug. "It's just a feeling, her sincerity. I don't know. Maybe I'm just curious to see if she truly wants to grow or if it was a fluke." Trevor's frown deepened. "We can't be guided by curiosity, Ryan. Especially now, with the big investor presentation around the corner. Every minute counts." Ryan sighed. "I'm aware. But let me handle this, all right?" Down on the street, Lena finally mustered the will to get up. She felt a swirl of regret. Maybe she should have insisted on speaking to HR right then, but the entire morning had rattled her, leaving a knot in her chest. She decided to walk a few blocks to clear her mind before riding the subway back home. In her cramped apartment, the glow of afternoon sun highlighted peeling paint and mismatched furniture. She'd lived in this space for 4 years, scraping by on part-time gigs, never quite catching the break she prayed for. Collapsing onto the worn couch, she closed her eyes. Ryan Sullivan's face flickered in her thoughts, his measured voice, the way he'd paused the entire meeting just to listen. "Ridiculous," she murmured to herself, shaking off a hopeful sense that he might call her back. She'd made an awkward mistake, and that was that. Her phone lay silent on the small coffee table. No messages from HR, no calls from Nancy. Yet doubt blossomed. Should she swallow her pride and apply directly through the online portal, ignoring that strange encounter? Or maybe she should just accept the next low-paying reception job if it was offered somewhere else. She couldn't afford to be too choosy. Early evening found her pacing the apartment, torn between giving up on this half-promise or trying to follow up. Maggie, calling after her nurse's shift, listened to Lena's conflicted recap. "Ryan Sullivan, that big CEO," Maggie said, voice tinged with disbelief. "If he didn't dismiss you outright, that's a sign. Maybe he sees potential you don't. You should call back." But Lena's own insecurities roared. "He was just being polite," she insisted. "I can't handle another rejection." That night, she read through Ryan's business card once more, the name Sullivan Holdings shining in embossed letters. She was caught between cynicism and a faint spark of hope. In the hushed solitude of her apartment, she asked herself the question she'd faced too many times: do I dare risk it again? The next morning, Lena awoke with an ache in her stomach that mingled hunger and worry. She threw on an old sweatshirt and brewed coffee in her tiny kitchen, the aroma barely masking her anxiety. Outside her window, the familiar sight of Queens unfurled, kids off to school, neighbors rushing to catch buses, the steady hum of traffic. This routine usually comforted her, but today she felt an itch for change. She debated calling Sullivan Holdings' main line. Should she make a formal inquiry about the receptionist opening? Her eyes flicked again to Ryan Sullivan's card, resting on her cluttered countertop. Something about that fateful elevator ride the day before still tugged at her mind. Could a silly mix-up really open a door to something bigger? By mid-morning, she decided she couldn't live in limbo. Gathering her nerve, she dialed the number. An automated system directed her through a series of prompts until, finally, Nancy's friendly voice came on. "Sullivan Holdings, Nancy speaking." "How may I help you?" Lena's heart pounded. "Hi, this is Lena Russell. We met briefly yesterday." "Oh, yes," Nancy exclaimed, recognizing her name at once. "Mr. Sullivan asked me about you. I was hoping you'd call. Are you available to come in again? He mentioned wanting a follow-up chat." A tremor of excitement coursed through Lena. Yes, of course," she replied. Minutes later, she had an appointment for the next day. Hanging up, she pressed her phone to her chest and whispered a small prayer that her nerves wouldn't betray her. That evening, Lena's close friend Maggie dropped by. They sat at the tiny round table in Lena's kitchen, sipping chamomile tea. Maggie, a 40-year-old nurse with steady eyes and a calm demeanor, had seen Lena struggle through endless short-term jobs. "This could be your big break," Maggie said, swirling her tea. "Or at least a step in the right direction. You've always wanted to prove yourself." Lena nodded. "I just hope I'm not getting my hopes up. What if it's just an informal courtesy? CEOs have no reason to talk to someone like me, not really." Maggie's brow furrowed. "Someone like you. You're smart, dedicated and resourceful. Don't sell yourself short, Lena." Later, when Maggie left, Lena sat alone, the quiet of her apartment thick around her. Part of her mind raced with possibilities. Maybe they needed an office helper. Perhaps it wasn't even the receptionist job. Could Ryan have seen something unique in her? Even the thought made her breath catch. Another part of her scolded these daydreams as naive. Meanwhile, across the river in his sleek midtown penthouse, Ryan flipped through Lena's resume again, searching for the intangible quality that had piqued his interest. He barely heard the city's nighttime hum below. His assistant, Camilla Patterson, had forwarded a dozen more robust candidates for various positions, people with degrees from prestigious universities. Yet he kept returning to Lena's unassuming file. He ran a hand through his short, dark hair, trying to rationalize it. There was a raw honesty about Lena that felt refreshing in his jaded corporate world. He didn't want to admit it, but her open, vulnerable manner had somehow broken through his usual defenses. The next day dawned bright. Lena chose a nicer blouse, still modest but neatly pressed, and took extra care styling her hair. She said goodbye to her nephew, Ethan, who lived nearby and sometimes spent weekends with her. He was 12, mischievous and curious about her fancy job interview. Lena tried to sound confident, but inside her heart fluttered. Riding the elevator up to the correct floor this time, Lena inhaled slowly. A corridor led to Nancy's desk, where the older woman greeted her kindly. Nervous energy pulsed in Lena's veins. She sensed that whatever awaited behind these walls might alter the course of her life. Nancy escorted her through wide glass doors, and there he was, Ryan Sullivan, standing by a window, phone in hand, gaze distant. At the sound of Lena's footsteps, he turned, flashing a welcoming smile. In that moment, Lena felt a quiet certainty that her decision to return was right, as though unseen omens had guided her here all along. Lena paused outside Ryan's spacious office, smoothing her blouse. A faint hum of adrenaline coursed through her. Nancy gestured for her to go in, then quietly closed the door behind her. Sunlight flooded the room, casting a warm glow across the modern furniture and large wooden desk. Ryan stood near a window, but turned to greet her with a nod. "Lena, thank you for coming," he said. His voice carried a cordial tone, but there was a softness beneath it. He motioned toward a pair of comfortable chairs set beside a small table. "Please, sit. I want to hear more about you, your goals, your experiences." Her nerves flared. She clasped her hands tightly, then remembered how she'd spent the previous night rehearsing possible questions, determined not to ramble like a frightened rabbit. Sitting opposite him, she lifted her chin. "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan," she began quietly. "I appreciate the chance. I know my resume doesn't compare to most candidates you'd see here, but I learn quickly. I'm dependable. I just need someone to believe in me enough to give me a start." Ryan studied her, his expression thoughtful. He asked about her previous jobs, her time in small offices, her responsibilities there. She explained how she managed scheduling, handled basic bookkeeping, and liaised with clients. Occasionally, her voice wavered, but she steadied herself by recalling Maggie's advice. "You're worthy. Don't be afraid to show it." "I'm curious," Ryan said after a while, tapping his fingertips against his chin. "You mentioned you want more stability. Is there something in particular that draws you to a large corporation like Sullivan Holdings?" A flush heated Lena's cheeks. Honesty always felt risky, but she took a breath. A bigger company could mean career growth and steady work. "I don't want to be stuck in a cycle of short-term gigs anymore. I'm not afraid of hard work. I just want a real shot at improving my life." Ryan nodded, glancing briefly out the window at the Manhattan skyline. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "all it takes is one person opening a door for you." He met her gaze again. "We do have an entry-level position open, some administrative tasks, part-time front desk coverage, a bit of data entry. It's not glamorous, but it might be a good start. If you're interested, I'll have HR prepare the details." Her heart soared, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I'd be very interested," she replied. Relief washed over her, mingled with a hint of disbelief. This might be the break she'd yearned for. Just then, the office door swung open, and Trevor Neal stepped inside, brow furrowed. He froze upon seeing Lena. "Oh, I thought you were alone, Ryan." Ryan cleared his throat. "Trevor, remember Lena Russell?" Trevor finished for him, the candidate from the other day. His eyes flickered with a trace of skepticism. "Good to see you again." Polite, but not exactly warm. "I was just telling Ms. Russell about a potential position," Ryan continued. "I trust you won't mind if we create a small role so she can learn the ropes." Trevor's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "As long as it doesn't interfere with the upcoming event prep," he said, mustering professional restraint. We're under a tight deadline, Ryan. Ryan rose from his seat, a subtle command to end the conversation. I'm aware of our timeline. Miss Russell can help with the workload, actually. Trevor offered Lena a curt smile and excused himself. The moment the door closed, Lena let out the breath she'd been holding. Ryan exhaled too, but his was more controlled. Don't mind Trevor, he said. He's cautious with any new hire. Lena found herself smiling. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I won't let you down. Ryan extended his hand across the table. She grasped it, feeling the firmness of his handshake. Come back tomorrow morning and we'll get you started. Welcome to Sullivan Holdings, Miss Russell. In that instant, Lena felt a swirl of excitement and lingering uncertainty. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet imagine. By accepting this offer, she stepped beyond the boundaries of her old limitations into a future filled with unknown challenges. Still, as her hand slipped from Ryan's, a flicker of determination lit her eyes. No matter what storms might come, she was ready to face them. Lena arrived early at Sullivan Holdings on her first official day, nerves buzzing beneath her calm exterior. The bustle in the lobby seemed more intense than before, and as she stepped off the elevator onto the correct floor, she wondered what lay ahead. In her few visits, she'd only seen a fraction of the corporation's sleek corridors and modern offices. Today, she'd finally get a true taste of the daily grind within these walls. Nancy, the company's seasoned secretary, greeted her with a kindly smile. Good morning, dear. Ready for your first day? Lena nodded, trying to steady her shaky breath. Absolutely, though I admit I'm a bit nervous. Nancy's warm laugh erased some of Lena's tension. Come with me. I'll show you where you'll start. They walked side by side through a hallway lined with glass panels and sleek artwork. You'll handle some administrative tasks at this smaller reception desk just across from Ryan's office, Nancy explained. Later, I'll introduce you to the folks in HR who'll finalize your paperwork, and after that, you'll shadow me for the rest of the day. Lena blinked. Shadow you? She had assumed Nancy, being so busy and respected, wouldn't have time to personally guide a new hire. Nancy's eyes sparkled with amusement. Oh, I do a lot more than answer phones. I keep track of schedules, coordinate events, and even advise Mr. Sullivan when needed. He wants you to learn from the ground up. She led Lena into a quiet break room, offering her a cup of coffee. The space was a stark contrast to the bustling corridor, cozy chairs, a few potted plants, and a soft hum from the coffee machine. Seated together, Nancy lowered her voice as though sharing a secret. Let me guess, you're worried about fitting in? She asked gently. Lena nodded, sipping her coffee. I've only worked in small businesses where everyone did a bit of everything. Being in a big corporation feels overwhelming. I don't want to make mistakes that might cost me my job. Nancy gave a knowing smile. I started at Sullivan Holdings decades ago when it was half this size. I was fresh out of a tiny community college, terrified of city life. But you learn to adapt, mostly by asking questions. Don't shy away from that. Their conversation flowed with surprising ease. Nancy revealed how she'd grown step by step, how Ryan's late father had initially hired her and shown faith in her determination. Mr. Sullivan inherited his father's instinct, Nancy said, and I think he sees some spark in you. That's a rare gift, so show him he's right. Lena swallowed. The idea of having the CEO's confidence still felt unreal, but Nancy's reassurance calmed her. I just hope I can live up to whatever he imagines. I don't have fancy degrees, Nancy patted her hand. Degrees are valuable, but heart and work ethic matter too. You'll learn the technical parts. What you can't be taught is sincerity, and you've already got that. A thoughtful glimmer crossed Nancy's face as she leaned in. Also, I've seen how Ryan looks at new employees. got a different reaction out of him. Lena's cheeks grew hot. Different? How so? I've known him a long time, Nancy replied with a cryptic smile. He's curious about you, in the best possible way. Before Lena could decipher that comment, the break room door opened, and a couple of employees hurried inside, pausing their chatter when they noticed Nancy. She stood, smoothing her skirt. All right, let's start your tour. You'll meet some key team members and learn the phone system. Baby steps. Despite the swirl of nerves, Lena felt a renewed sense of possibility. She rose to follow Nancy back into the corridors, determined to soak up every piece of advice her new mentor offered. The day was just beginning, and while each step felt like venturing into unfamiliar territory, Lena sensed she wasn't walking it alone. Nancy had taken her under her wing, an unexpected ally in a place where power suits and big titles could easily overwhelm. The next few days rushed by like a whirlwind. Lena was introduced to the HR manager, an efficient woman named Karen with a brisk but polite manner. Paperwork got processed, direct deposits were set up, and Lena officially became an employee of Sullivan Holdings. It was surreal. One moment she'd worried about paying rent, the next she was carrying a company badge around her neck. On Wednesday morning, Ryan Sullivan himself stopped by Lena's small desk. It was early hour, and few people had arrived, so the corridor was relatively quiet. She was arranging some files Nancy had asked her to summarize. Looking up, she nearly jumped when she saw him standing there, wearing a charcoal suit and a disarming smile. "Morning, Lena," he said, voice soft. "I just wanted to check how you're settling in. Any problems?" She tried not to let her nervousness show. "All good so far. Nancy's been guiding me." "I really appreciate the chance to prove myself." Ryan nodded. "I'm glad you're here. If you need anything, or if things feel confusing, don't hesitate to let me know." He cast a quick glance around, then lowered his tone. "And don't worry if you feel overwhelmed at times. That's normal. Even I get overwhelmed now and then." It was a small admission, but it disarmed her. She found a smile forming. "I'll keep that in mind," she murmured. Then, with a quick, polite nod, Ryan made his way to his office, leaving her with a glowing sense of validation. Later that day, Lena took her lunch break alone. She headed to a casual cafe across the street, glad for a moment to breathe. The city's chaotic heartbeat thrummed as she navigated the crowded crosswalk. Jostled by sharp-dressed executives on their phones, she clutched her purse and tried to blend in. She found an empty table by the window, ordered a chicken salad, and let out a soft sigh. In the solitude, she thought of Maggie's words, "You can't move forward if you keep holding on to the old you." Lena realized her comfort zone had been a place of consistent underemployment and meager hopes. Now she was officially letting go of that. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. While she stirred her iced tea, her phone buzzed. Another text from Maggie. "So proud of you." Don't let doubt creep in. Lena smiled at the screen, grateful for that reminder. Despite the swirl of new responsibilities, she was determined to embrace this transition fully. The moment she returned, Nancy beckoned her from down the hall. "We've got some bigger tasks now that you're officially on board," Nancy said, leading Lena into a side office stocked with binders and a large bulletin board. "Mr. Sullivan wants us to organize preliminary details for an upcoming investor event. We're not on the main planning team yet, but we'll gather the initial logistics. Think you can handle part of that research?" Lena's heart jolted. She didn't want to mess up. "I'll do my best," she said, swallowing her anxiety. "What exactly does it entail?" Nancy explained that they needed approximate headcounts, venue availability, and preliminary cost estimates. "It's tedious but critical. Accuracy matters here." She then gave Lena a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "I'll help you along. Don't panic." Later, as Lena pored over spreadsheets, she realized this was her first real leap away from smaller jobs. She no longer answered phone calls for a cramped, one-room office. She was dealing with large-scale data, contributing to a future event that might bring in millions of dollars for Sullivan Holdings. She found the entire undertaking both thrilling and daunting, like standing at the edge of a vast pool, ready to jump. Of course, not everyone was excited. Trevor Neal, passing by with a clipboard, offered a clipped greeting that felt more like a reminder of his skepticism. Lena caught his disapproving glance, but chose to press on, determined. By the end of that day, she felt mentally exhausted, but oddly alive. She understood that growing meant leaving behind her old sense of security. With each new responsibility, she was bidding farewell to the cocoon that once kept her dreams so small. And though apprehension still fluttered in her stomach, Lena whispered a silent promise to herself. "I won't let fear stop me now." Lena's new routine kicked into high gear. Each morning, she arrived early, stepping into the polished lobby where bright LED screens showcased Sullivan Holdings' achievements. Employees zipped by, lattes in hand, eyes on phone screens. She'd greet the security guard, pass through the turnstiles with her badge, and head upstairs to her assigned desk. It felt exhilarating, in a dizzying way, to be part of such a bustling enterprise. Right away, Nancy insisted on showing Lena every nook and cranny relevant to her position. One afternoon, they ventured to the marketing floor, brimming with animated discussions and colorful mood boards pinned to walls. Another day, they visited the IT department, a techie haven of coding chatter and multiple monitors. In marketing, Lena's senses were nearly overwhelmed by vibrant visuals, half-finished mock-ups, and energetic staff debating slogans. "If you're ever stuck, these folks can help you refine presentations," Nancy explained, guiding Lena through a maze of desks. "They're pretty resourceful and talkative. Don't be shy." Down in IT, the glow of screen after screen made Lena blink. She glimpsed teams troubleshooting software, testing out new programs. Nancy introduced her to a bespectacled young programmer who politely showed Lena how to access a few protected servers. "If you ever face any technical glitches, we're here," he said, tapping away at a keyboard. Each new floor felt like stepping onto a different planet. Lena told Maggie one evening that she'd never realized a single corporation could contain so many distinct worlds under one roof. Maggie teased her gently, reminding Lena how far she'd come from the cramped offices she used to know. By the second week, Lena had begun forming a mental map of Sullivan Holdings. The main reception area was just the tip of the iceberg. The heart of the company, Lena discovered, lay in its collaborative spirit. Departments relying on each other to achieve collective goals. She found that notion oddly comforting. Perhaps she wouldn't have to carry every burden alone. Still, she noticed how some employees viewed her with mild suspicion. A few whispered that she seemed too green, too untested. Even Camilla Patterson, Ryan's efficient assistant, greeted Lena politely, but kept conversations strictly work-related. Lena sensed a quiet reservation, as though Camilla was unconvinced about her place here. In contrast, Nancy's unwavering support gave Lena a sense of belonging. One afternoon, after hours of back-to-back data entry, Nancy handed her a steaming cup of herbal tea. "You're doing great," she said softly. "Yes, it's all new, but you're catching on quickly," Lena sipped, grateful. "It's a lot to absorb," she admitted, "but I want to learn. I want to prove to Mr. Sullivan and the rest that I'm not just an accidental hire." Nancy nodded. "Keep at it. In a place like this, consistent effort matters more than big talk." On Friday, Ryan stopped by Lena's station with a small project, sorting feedback surveys from a past investor meeting, looking for patterns that might shape future events. "Not glamorous," he apologized, "but it's important to pinpoint what worked and what needs improvement." Lena accepted the file, heart fluttering at his casual confidence in her. "I'll handle it," she promised. Even a mundane task seemed like an honor, considering how critical these events were to the company's success. As the day wound down, she stayed late, combing through the surveys in a quiet conference room. Rows of data formed patterns in her mind, and she started jotting down potential themes. She lost track of time until nearly everyone else had gone home. Finally, she gathered her notes and shut off the lights. Stepping onto the empty street, she felt a swirl of pride and fatigue. The crisp evening air of Manhattan brushed against her cheeks, reminding her that she was immersed in a world she'd once viewed from a distance. Her steps carried her to the subway, adrenaline still in her veins. Yes, it was unknown territory, but she was navigating it day by day, gleaning new confidence and purpose at every turn. By the start of her third week, Lena was knee-deep in tasks, booking meetings, scheduling phone calls, inputting data, and double-checking reports. She'd claimed a small workstation near Nancy's desk, equipped with a sleek computer and well-organized filing trays. Every morning, Nancy handed her a prioritized list of to-dos, and by evening, Lena would leave it filled with check marks. Yet challenges loomed around every corner. Twice, she nearly botched Ryan's scheduling when requests from different department heads clashed. Another time, she confused a vendor's time zone, almost setting a meeting for midnight. Thankfully, Nancy stepped in, spotting the mistakes before they escalated. Each error felt like a bruise on Lena's self-esteem, but she vowed to learn from them rather than crumble. One afternoon, she hurried across the executive floor to deliver papers to Ryan. She accidentally brushed shoulders with Trevor Neal, who seemed frazzled. A tense expression crossed his face. "Watch where you're going," he grumbled, barely sparing her a glance. In the moment, Lena's cheeks flamed, but she forced herself to stand a little taller, refusing to shrink into apologies. Later that day, Nancy took Lena aside. "Don't let Trevor get under your skin. He's under enormous pressure preparing for the upcoming investor meeting. He's not always that prickly." Lena managed a small smile. "I'm trying not to take it personally." Nancy patted her arm reassuringly. "That's the spirit. You're doing well, truly. Every big place has its tough personalities." As days blurred into each other, Lena started piecing together how the company functioned. She learned that various directors, each responsible for a core part of the business, regularly pitched Ryan and Trevor on budgets, expansions, or new clients. She also observed how Ryan balanced a rigid sense of discipline with an occasional spark of warmth, especially around long-time employees like Nancy. Her biggest lesson, though, was that Sullivan Holdings thrived on efficiency. Deadlines were tight. Employees rarely had time to chit-chat. Lena realized she had to be more than just diligent. She needed to be quick and precise, too. At first, she worried her background hadn't prepared her for this pace, but she discovered that her years of juggling multiple roles in small offices taught her adaptability. She might not have had the best resume, but she knew how to pivot swiftly between tasks and keep calm under stress. One morning, Julie, a friendly colleague from the marketing department, stopped by. A petite woman with lively green eyes, Julie had overheard Lena asking someone about a supply order. "Here, I'll show you how to fill out that requisition form," she offered. "We have a certain system for purchases, especially if it's for an event." Relieved, Lena followed Julie to a shared workstation. In less than 10 minutes, Julie simplified a process that had seemed impossibly complex. "You'll get the hang of it," Julie said warmly. "I was new here once, too. Just keep asking questions." "Thank you," Lena replied, touched by the help. Moments like these reminded her she wasn't alone in her climb. Indeed, she was learning to walk among corporate giants who had bigger titles and broader shoulders, but she was determined to stand on equal ground. At the end of the workday, Lena felt exhausted in a way she'd never experienced before. This place demanded much more concentration and stamina than the small gigs of her past. Yet with every hurdle she cleared, whether it was a scheduling glitch or a new software system, her confidence grew. That evening, she called Maggie, recounting snippets of her day and the kind gestures from Nancy and Julie. "Maybe this is exactly where I need to be," Lena said quietly, thinking aloud. "It's like I'm discovering parts of myself I didn't know existed." Maggie's voice held a smile. "I always knew you had this in you. Keep pushing, you'll see. There's no limit once you learn to handle these bigger responsibilities." After hanging up, Lena gazed at the towering silhouette of the company's skyscraper from her apartment window. In the reflection, she glimpsed the faint outline of a woman who wasn't intimidated by the heights anymore. Despite aches, doubts, and a lingering worry about Trevor's disapproval, she pressed forward, learning to stride, step by step, among those who once seemed far beyond her reach. Lena kept to a determined pace, soaking up knowledge wherever she could. One morning, she headed to the employee cafeteria for a quick break. The space was more relaxed than the formal meeting rooms upstairs, with rows of simple tables, a self-serve coffee station, and a few bright posters encouraging teamwork. The aroma of fresh pastries reminded her she'd skipped breakfast. She snagged a bagel and scanned the seating area for a friendly face. Spotting an empty table by the window, she settled in. Moments later, two women approached, Julie from marketing and Ava, a 40-something analyst with a warm smile and a commanding presence. Ava was tall, with curly hair pulled into a neat bun. She carried herself confidently, as if used to standing her ground. "Mind if we join?" Ava asked, holding a paper cup of coffee. "We've been meaning to say hello properly." "Of course," Lena replied, relieved to see their friendly smiles. Over the next few minutes, she learned that Julie grew up in a small Midwest town and had spent years working her way up through different roles. Ava spoke candidly about her own journey, including transferring from a competitor's firm after feeling overlooked for promotions. They listened eagerly as Lena shared her initial discomfort and insecurities. She admitted how landing here had been a complete accident, quite literally. "I still wonder if people think I'm a fluke," she said quietly, fiddling with the rim of her coffee cup. Julie offered a conspiratorial grin. "Honestly, we've all felt like flukes at some point, especially early on. It's New York. The city thrives on outsiders making it big." Ava reached across the table to pat Lena's hand. "What matters is how you use this chance. If Ryan and Nancy see something in you, trust that, and if you ever need help, come to us. We might not have fancy job titles like CFO, but we know how this place operates." Lena's eyes misted, touched by their kindness. She hadn't expected to form real connections in a corporate environment that felt so impersonal at times. Yet here were two co-workers, near strangers, really, extending their support without hesitation. It felt like the beginnings of true friendship. Over the next week, Lena found herself gravitating toward Julie and Ava whenever uncertainty crept in. Whether it was clarifying an internal process or reminding her that a minor mishap wasn't the end of the world, they provided down-to-earth advice. After one particularly grueling day, all three took a spontaneous walk around the block to decompress, sharing stories about their families and the small pleasures they looked forward to after work. In these interactions, Lena sensed a powerful camaraderie. She'd always believed she had to stand on her own. Her experiences often taught her that self-reliance was survival. But at Sullivan Holdings, she was discovering that alliances could be forged in the unlikeliest places, and those alliances might be exactly what she needed to succeed. The only thorn in her side remained Trevor's chilly demeanor. Despite her best efforts to prove herself, his curt nods and wary glances persisted. One afternoon, as Lena carried a stack of documents toward his office, she overheard him on the phone. He was discussing budgets and overhead costs, his tone sharp. "Yes, but I want to see if that new administrative hire is affecting efficiency," he said briskly. Lena's cheeks burned. He was likely referring to her. Before she could hear more, she forced herself to knock and enter. He ended the call and gave her a tight smile. "Leave those on the desk," he said. Then, without another word, he returned to his work. Later, relaying that exchange to Ava and Julie, she tried to hide her discouraged sigh. Ava squeezed her shoulder. "Don't let him rattle you. Prove him wrong with consistent results. He'll come around, or at least he'll have to acknowledge your contributions." Their unwavering support buoyed Lena's spirits. Each day, she uncovered more about the job, about corporate politics, and about her own capacity to learn. And in these honest friendships, so unexpected in a place this big, she felt a growing resolve. She might still be the newcomer, but she wasn't alone. Lena's heart pounded as she hurried to a sudden, urgent meeting Trevor had scheduled. The email subject line read only, "Important, all administrative staff." She arrived in a small conference room to find a handful of colleagues already seated: Nancy, Camilla Patterson, and 2 assistants from adjacent departments. Trevor stood at the head of the table, tablet in hand. He barely glanced up when Lena slipped into a chair. "Thanks for coming," Trevor began, his voice clipped. "We have a tight deadline for the next phase of investor event planning, and there've been oversights. Certain venue confirmations are behind schedule. If we don't nail this down, we risk losing one of our top investors." Lena swallowed hard. She wasn't sure who had dropped the ball, but Trevor's glare made it feel personal. As he tapped through slides on the screen, she realized some reservations had not been finalized. The main conference hall they'd intended to use might no longer be available. Discomfort spread through the room. Nobody wanted to be at fault for this fiasco. Lena glanced sideways at Nancy, who wore a concerned frown. She'd heard about the investor event in passing, but she wasn't on the official planning team. She wondered how her role might come under scrutiny now. Trevor's eyes swept across their faces and stopped on Lena. "Ms. Russell, you're assisting with preliminary logistics, right?" Her chest tightened. I've mostly been helping Nancy with data entry and early vendor quotes," she said, careful to keep her tone calm. "But I wasn't directly—" "So you're aware of certain arrangements that should have been confirmed?" he cut in, voice cold. "Or did you not catch that detail?" Heat pooled in Lena's cheeks. She felt everyone's eyes on her, a mix of curiosity and pity. "I handled part of the quotes." "Yes," she said, fighting the urge to shrink in her seat. "I followed up with the vendor last week, and they told me they'd need an official deposit form from finance. I never received it, so I thought—" Trevor interrupted again, turning the tablet screen toward them. "We needed more aggressive follow-up. Now we're at risk of losing the space." The blame stung, even if logically she knew the finance team's deposit process was out of her hands. Nancy cleared her throat. "With respect, Trevor, Lena did notify me about the deposit requirement. I was waiting on an approval signature from your office." She spoke evenly, her gaze steady but polite. Trevor paused, tension seeping into his posture. He seemed to weigh Nancy's remark. "Then next time, don't wait. If something's urgent, come to me directly." His tone brooked no argument, though it skirted responsibility for the missing signature. Camilla glanced at Lena sympathetically but stayed silent. The rest of the staff kept their eyes down, likely grateful not to be singled out. After Trevor finished outlining a new action plan, one that required everyone to jump through hoops to fix the situation, he dismissed them with a curt wave. Lena exhaled, her heart still hammering. She felt a swirl of embarrassment, anger, and helplessness. Nancy guided her out into the hall, placing a comforting hand on her arm. "Don't take this personally," Nancy said quietly. "Trevor is worried about the event and gets overly harsh when pressed. But you did your part." Lena's chest felt tight. "He practically accused me of not doing my job. If I spoke up more, I'd look like I'm deflecting blame. If I stay quiet, I look incompetent." Her voice wavered with pent-up frustration. "I just want to prove I can handle this." Julie and Ava caught up with them in the corridor, offering words of consolation. "He's done this to me too," Ava admitted, rolling her eyes. "Give it time. He's old school, thinks fear is the best motivator." Despite the reassurance, Lena felt rattled the rest of the day. That was her first direct taste of how power dynamics could crush your confidence in seconds. Part of her yearned to hide, but another part stiffened with resolve. She refused to let this confrontation chase her away. During a quick break, she reminded herself of the vow she'd made upon being hired. She would stand firm. One rocky meeting wouldn't undo all she'd worked for. And so, while her heart still pounded from the shock, Lena returned to her desk, determined to prove Trevor wrong. She would meet every deadline, secure every missing piece. Slowly, she began researching backup venues, drafting follow-up emails, and rallying the small group of assistants to ensure they wouldn't be blindsided again. In the days following Trevor's tense meeting, Lena threw herself into a string of demanding tasks. The investor event now loomed ahead like a ticking clock, each passing hour bringing new responsibilities. Her calendar was packed with calls to venues, follow-up emails to caterers, and updates to the budgeting spreadsheet that Trevor monitored so closely. Gone were her simpler days of inputting data at a leisurely pace. Now, she worked under constant pressure. The first challenge came when one of the high-end hotels they'd contacted suddenly announced it was overbooked, retracting its prior offer. Rather than panic, Lena immediately switched to backup leads she and Nancy had researched. She spent an entire afternoon phoning alternate locations, carefully weighing cost, capacity, and availability. By sunset, she'd negotiated an option only slightly pricier than the original plan. Nancy praised her persistence, but Lena felt too exhausted to celebrate much. She just wanted to ensure no cracks opened for Trevor to exploit. The second test arrived in the form of scheduling conflicts. Ryan and Trevor needed to meet with key investors in different time zones, and Lena was responsible for arranging a complicated series of calls. She juggled these demands with her usual tasks, answering internal queries, helping the marketing department finalize promotional materials, and updating the HR team about new hires. At times, she felt like a circus performer balancing spinning plates, hoping none would crash. Yet each small success, like confirming a tricky conference call or correcting a minor scheduling error before it snowballed, renewed her sense of purpose. Amid all this chaos, Ryan seemed to take quiet notice of her efforts. He would stop by her desk, occasionally with an encouraging word or a question about her progress. "You're handling a lot," he remarked one afternoon, scanning the spreadsheets she'd compiled. "If you ever feel like you're drowning, let me know. We've got other people who can help." She appreciated the offer, yet part of her felt compelled to prove herself capable. "I'm all right," she insisted, pushing aside her fatigue, just determined to make this event run smoothly. Still, the long hours began to wear on her. She'd return to her small apartment each night, heat up a quick dinner, and sink into the couch, mind spinning with tomorrow's tasks. She confided in Maggie, explaining how the sense of urgency never let up. Maggie, always a calm presence, reminded her to pace herself. "You don't want to burn out," she cautioned. "You finally have a shot. Don't let stress sabotage you." The third major challenge struck when a prominent potential investor demanded last-minute additions to the event's schedule, including a more elaborate presentation segment. Lena found herself scrambling to gather design inputs from marketing and fresh data from finance. Some colleagues griped that she was adding to their workload, but Lena persisted. clarifying that the request came from top-level management. Despite the friction, she coordinated the new plans meticulously. Even Julie and Ava, her allies, teased her about being a mini project manager. "Look at you," Julie said with a grin, "bossing the rest of us around in the nicest possible way." Trevor, however, remained guarded. On one occasion, he spotted Lena conferring with a team of junior associates about the revised slides. He pulled her aside afterward, expression stiff. "Don't overstep your position," he said in a low tone. "Managing the entire staff isn't in your purview." His words stung, but she managed a steady response. "I'm only passing along what's needed to make the event succeed. Everyone's on board to help." She spoke with more confidence than she felt, yet she refused to let him see any vulnerability. By week's end, she was physically drained, but strangely fulfilled. Each hurdle had forced her to learn new systems, negotiate on the fly, and collaborate with co-workers she barely knew. She suspected that forging these bonds, despite occasional friction, was crucial for the upcoming presentation. The investor event would either cement her reputation as a reliable member of the team or confirm Trevor's suspicions that she was in over her head. As Lena wrapped up yet another late night, she glanced around the quiet office. The hum of the HVAC system filled the space. She saved her files, turned off her computer, and allowed a faint smile of satisfaction. Yes, she felt tested by a seemingly endless gauntlet of tasks, but at least she was learning to run, not just walk, in the company of giants. Late one afternoon, Lena felt her phone buzz in her purse. Expecting a message from Maggie or an internal memo from Nancy, she glanced at the screen. Instead, she froze. The name flashing before her eyes belonged to someone she'd wanted to forget. Victor Harding, her former boss at a tiny real estate office, a boss who'd belittled her daily, blamed her for every minor hiccup, and left her confidence in tatters. She stepped away from her desk to a quiet corner, heart pounding. Why on earth was he calling now? Conflicting impulses raged inside her, to ignore it or to face the fear and answer. Finally, she swiped to accept. "Lena," a familiar, patronizing voice drawled. "Heard you're working for a fancy corporation these days. Figured it was about time you aimed higher." She could practically see the smirk on his face. "We're wrapping up a deal that might intersect with Sullivan Holdings soon. I might swing by your office to coordinate details." A pit formed in her stomach. Harding's presence in her life had been toxic before, and she dreaded the idea of him darkening her new path. For a moment, she managed a polite reply. "Yes, I'm at Sullivan Holdings, but I'm not in real estate anymore, so I'm not sure if—" He cut in, voice slick. "Oh, I know that. Still, they might be looking to expand into certain developments. Heard your CFO might be involved in some property negotiations. Thought I'd drop by. You could show me around, for old time's sake." The memory of his sneering comments about her lack of ambition flashed through her mind. Lena forced herself to remain civil. "Sure," she muttered. "If there's a relevant meeting, contact the appropriate department. We have a formal process for visits." Her voice wavered slightly, betraying her discomfort. When the call ended, she felt drained. She pressed her back against the wall, hands trembling. Of all people to pop back into her life, why him? In that moment, she realized how deeply her past scars still ached, even though she'd thought she'd moved on. Harding had once fueled her insecurities, making her believe she was incapable of anything more than menial tasks. The next morning, Nancy noticed Lena's distraction. "You look pale, dear. Everything all right?" she asked, placing a comforting hand on Lena's shoulder. Lena hesitated but sensed she could trust Nancy. She mentioned Harding's call, a shortened version of the cruelty she'd once endured. Nancy's eyes narrowed. "If he shows up, I'll make sure he doesn't bother you. But if it becomes more than a casual visit, we'll inform Ryan or Trevor. You're safe here." Though touched by Nancy's protectiveness, Lena still felt uneasy. She couldn't help picturing Harding waltzing into the building, humiliating her before her new colleagues. She didn't want to look weak, especially in front of Trevor, who already doubted her capabilities. That night, she trudged home later than usual, weighed down by swirling thoughts. Exhaustion hit hard, but she spent a good hour texting Maggie, who offered level-headed advice. "Don't let him bully you again. You have a new life now, and new allies. The Lena he knew is gone." In the following days, she found herself double-checking the lobby visitor lists and tensing at every unfamiliar face. She hated that old fear creeping back into her chest, that sense that no matter how hard she tried to start over, the past could reappear at the worst possible moment. Amid these worries, she threw herself into her responsibilities. Julie and Ava noticed her extra anxiety. Lena confided in them just enough to explain she might see someone from her past. Both women insisted she had nothing to fear. "Trevor's tough, but he respects results," Ava pointed out gently. "And Ryan, well, Ryan's not going to dismiss you over one awkward visitor. Trust me." Their confidence gave Lena a glimmer of hope. She'd grown here at Sullivan Holdings, learned new skills, forged friendships, and proven she could thrive under pressure. Yet the old ghosts still haunted her mind. As she walked the quiet corridors after hours, the hum of fluorescent lights above, she wondered if she truly believed what Maggie had said, that the Lena from that tiny real estate office no longer existed. But for better or worse, the next phase of the investor event loomed, and she had no time to dwell on her insecurities. If Harding did appear, she'd have to face him, alongside the entire swirling tide of corporate challenges in her new life. She could only hope that she was strong enough now to stand up for herself and to prove once and for all that her past no longer dictated her future. The morning of the big investor event felt charged with electricity. The entire office buzzed as staff scrambled to finalize last-minute details, printing name badges, checking the catering setup, ensuring the projector system worked flawlessly. The atmosphere was so hectic that Lena barely had time to acknowledge her own nerves. But just as she was about to deliver a key file to Ryan, her phone chimed. A quick glance revealed a frantic text from the lead event coordinator. "Emergency. The main venue is double-booked. We may not have access after 3 p.m. Shock coursed through Lena. This was the facility they'd painstakingly secured weeks ago. They'd placed a deposit, signed an agreement. How could it still be double-booked? Her mind spun. The entire investor event was scheduled to start late in the afternoon and continue into the evening. If the venue forced them out, it would be a catastrophe, not just for Sullivan Holdings, but for her reputation. Everyone, especially Trevor, might pin the blame on her. Without hesitation, she hurried to find Trevor, who was poring over documents in a temporary command center near the conference rooms. The tension in his face spoke volumes. "I already heard," he said, voice tight. "They claim their system glitched and allowed another client to pay a premium to secure the same slot. How does this happen at the 11th hour?" Lena swallowed, her pulse thudding. "I'll call them again. See if we can salvage it." She grabbed her phone, stepping into the hallway. Dialing the venue's manager, she tried to remain calm. Polite but firm, she asserted that Sullivan Holdings had a binding contract. The manager, sounding equally harried, insisted they'd done everything by the book. "We'll refund your deposit," he offered lamely. But the other party's contract was sealed with a larger payment. Ending the call, Lena felt an icy pit in her stomach. She relayed the bad news to Trevor and Nancy, who had just joined them. Furious, Trevor paced while Nancy's brow furrowed deeply. "We don't have time to find a new place that meets all our needs," Trevor muttered. The event starts in hours. Investors are already flying in. Lena's heart pounded. "Let me try something else," she said, adrenaline fueling her. "We had a backup list of venues from earlier, right? Maybe one can accommodate us last minute, or at least host part of the event." Trevor let out a bitter laugh. "A venue that's large enough, centrally located, and available with only hours' notice? Good luck." His skepticism stung, but she didn't let it paralyze her. With Nancy's help, Lena dug out the old vendor spreadsheet from her frantic search weeks ago. They burned through calls, facing one rejection after another. Some venues were closed for renovations. Others were hosting weddings or corporate luncheons, leaving no space. Each "sorry, we're booked" hammered at Lena's hopes. Time ticked away. It felt like they were slamming against a solid wall with no clear detour. Ryan, caught in a flurry of calls with high-level attendees, paced the corridor outside his office. His expression, though tight, conveyed determination. "We have to figure this out," he said bluntly, scanning Lena's anxious face. "I'm pulling every business contact I have, seeing if someone owes us a favor." Despite the frenzy, Trevor's attitude only worsened. He began muttering about how one oversight or delayed signature might have saved them from this fiasco. Lena felt each veiled accusation like a slap. She struggled to keep her composure, reminding herself that she'd done everything by the book. By midday, the office felt charged with desperation. The event coordinator kept bombarding Lena's phone with updates. Investors asking about location, some are en route. The entire day took on a surreal edge as staff scrambled and phones rang ceaselessly. All the while, the memory of that old real estate fiasco with Victor Harding gnawed at Lena. She felt the same helpless panic as before, the fear that she'd be singled out and humiliated. For a brief moment, she wondered if quitting would be easier than shouldering the blame for a meltdown this massive, but the thought passed quickly. She looked around at Nancy, sweaty and frazzled but still trying to remain calm, at Julie, emailing contacts from marketing in search of last-minute alternatives, and at Ava, who had extended her shift to help coordinate. They were in this together. Even if Trevor's voice seethed with frustration, the others were working as a team. As the clock raced toward the event's start time, Lena faced the harsh truth. They might have to cancel, or at least postpone. The possibility made her stomach churn. If no miracle venue came through, the entire months-long effort would collapse like a house of cards. And for the first time since she'd joined Sullivan Holdings, Lena felt truly cornered, her confidence shaken. She stood before an impassable wall. No venue, no time, no easy solution. Everything she'd worked for could crumble within hours, unless she, Ryan, and the rest somehow found a way to break through the impossible. Just when all hope seemed lost, Lena's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Julie. Breathless, Julie announced she'd found a potential lead, a midtown venue that rarely hosted corporate events but might be vacant tonight due to a sudden cancellation. Lena nearly dropped her phone in relief. It was far from perfect, smaller than the original space, and lacking some of the luxurious features their top investors expected. But it was available, and that alone gave them a lifeline. Wasting no time, Lena looped Nancy into the call, then raced to find Trevor. He looked up from a flurry of budget sheets, eyes rimmed with tension. "We've got a possible fallback," Lena said, voice trembling with a mix of excitement and anxiety. "I need your approval to secure it right now." Trevor's gaze sharpened. "Location?" She explained the midtown spot, emphasizing that while it wasn't quite on par with their initial choice, it had a decent capacity and was near several major hotels. "We'd have to hustle to adjust the presentation layout," she added, "and the caterers might need extra time to set up, but it's doable." A tense silence stretched between them before Trevor heaved a sigh. "Get Ryan to sign off." "Fast!" Lena nodded and hurried to Ryan's office, nearly colliding with him in the corridor. Their eyes met. "We might have something," she blurted, hardly pausing to breathe. She outlined the plan, and Ryan's shoulders eased slightly. "It's smaller, but at least we can save the event," he murmured. "Book it. Send a company-wide update right away." In a burst of coordinated chaos, messages flew throughout Sullivan Holdings. Nancy handled calls to investors, explaining the venue switch with apologies for the inconvenience. Julie worked on reprinting signage and updated invitations to display the new address. Ava tackled logistics with the caterers, ironing out timing details. Lena raced between departments, ensuring every piece of the puzzle was locked in. Though the entire fix was patchwork at best, a tremor of hope began to spread among the staff. Maybe they'd pull it off after all. Hours later, as Lena rode in a company car to the new location, her heart pounded against her ribcage. The event was set to begin in less than an hour. Nancy sat beside her, rifling through name tags. "Any idea if Trevor's calmed down?" Lena asked quietly, recalling how he'd stormed out of the office earlier. Nancy managed a wry smile. "He's not the type to show relief, even if he feels it. Right now, I think he's just focused on damage control with top investors." The car pulled up to a modest building with an understated entrance. While it lacked the grandeur of the previous venue, the staff inside hustled to arrange chairs, set up a small stage, and set out refreshments. Lena inhaled deeply, stepping into the main hall. Its vaulted ceiling and simple decor gave it a cozy ambience. Maybe this wouldn't be such a disaster, she thought. At least it looked neat and professional. Investors began trickling in sooner than expected, some grumbling about the last-minute address change, others eyeing the new surroundings with curiosity. Lena plastered on her most confident smile, directing them to the registration table. Nancy welcomed them gracefully, playing the role of unflappable hostess. Meanwhile, Ryan arrived, quickly surveying the space with discerning eyes. His expression was tense but resolute. He offered Lena a brief nod. "You did well finding this place so quickly." Then, with a faint curve of his lips, he added, "I appreciate your persistence. This could have been a total train wreck." Gratitude filled her chest. "We still have to make sure the program runs smoothly," she cautioned, refusing to celebrate too soon. And so the event began. Ryan opened with a short speech, acknowledging the venue shift in a polished, almost effortless manner, spinning it as a testament to Sullivan Holdings' flexibility. Trevor took the stage next, detailing the company's financial outlook. Despite his usual tense manner, he delivered the presentation flawlessly. Lena watched from the side, biting her lip every time a microphone crackled or a slide advanced too slowly. But the technical snags were minor. Investors nodded, took notes, and asked pointed questions, which Trevor and Ryan answered adeptly. Somewhere in the middle of the event, Lena slipped behind the scenes to check with the caterers. They were running low on a particular appetizer, so she made a quick call to arrange extra hors d'oeuvres. As she ended the conversation, leaning against a wall, she let out a shaky exhale. They were making it work, somehow. 2 hours later, the investor reception wound down to polite applause. Conversations spilled over into mingling sessions, business cards exchanged under the glimmer of overhead lighting. While the entire night had an undercurrent of anxiety, the dreaded meltdown never occurred. Lena caught Ryan's eye across the room. He raised his glass in a small toast, an unspoken acknowledgement of her contribution. And in that moment, relief surged through her like warm sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Yes, the day was fraught with near disaster, but they'd found a glimmer of light in all the chaos. The week following the investor event felt like a collective exhale at Sullivan Holdings. While not every detail had been perfect, the presentation succeeded in reassuring major stakeholders, and no critical deals fell through. Most employees carried themselves with a sense of hard-earned pride. Lena felt it too. Even the memory of that frantic venue scramble couldn't overshadow the fact that they'd salvaged the event against all odds. A few mornings later, Ryan called Lena into his office. She noticed the fatigue behind his eyes, but also a genuine warmth as he gestured for her to sit. "I wanted to say thanks," he began, tapping a stack of folders on his desk. "If you and Nancy hadn't found that backup plan, we might be sifting through a PR nightmare right now." Lena's cheeks warmed. "I was just part of a team. Everyone pitched in." Ryan nodded, a faint smile curving his lips. "True, but you spearheaded some of those emergency calls and negotiations. I see you pushing yourself." He paused, glancing out the window at Manhattan's skyline. "We can't ignore the fact that you're not just the same shy newcomer from a few weeks ago. You've proven your value under pressure." His words made her heart flutter. She remembered that first day, stumbling into his office, stammering an apology for being in the wrong place. Now, she felt an odd sense of belonging in this high-rise world, even if she never forgot her modest roots. "Thank you," she said softly. She wanted to say more, but didn't trust her voice not to waver with emotion. In the days that followed, the shift in the office atmosphere was palpable. Trevor, though still brisk, appeared less antagonistic. He passed Lena in the corridor and offered a curt nod that almost resembled approval. Ava teased Lena later, calling that nod the biggest compliment Trevor gives. Julie chimed in, recounting how he'd once gone a whole year without acknowledging a fellow co-worker's contributions. "You're moving up," she quipped, making Lena laugh. Meanwhile, Nancy beamed with pride whenever Lena crossed her path. "I've got to retire someday," she joked. "Nice to know there's someone to pass the baton to if I ever do." But Lena's transformation extended beyond workplace validation. At home, she found herself re-evaluating her life. She spent an evening revisiting her old resume, amazed at how much had changed in just a short span. She still had that small apartment in Queens, but her outlook felt bigger now, more expansive. When her nephew Ethan visited one weekend, he peppered her with questions. "So, are you, super important at your job now?" She laughed, ruffling his hair. "I'm getting there. It just takes time and hard work." Her friend Maggie noticed it too. Over coffee, Maggie observed how Lena's posture had straightened, her once timid voice now carrying an undercurrent of determination. "Everything about you says you've found your footing," Maggie commented. "I'm so proud." Yet with new confidence came an awareness of how far she could still go. She wanted to keep learning, maybe even enroll in business courses at night, expand her skill set. The idea both excited and frightened her. But she kept it tucked in the back of her mind, a possibility for the future. At the office, opportunities arose for Lena to assist with small-scale projects beyond event planning. Some directors invited her to join brainstorming sessions, valuing her perspective. Each invitation fueled the sense that her role wasn't limited to pushing paper and answering calls. Even the memory of Victor Harding's sudden reappearance dimmed in the glow of her recent achievements. While she still dreaded crossing paths with him, she no longer felt helpless. She had proven her worth in front of far more intimidating people than her old boss could ever be. Late one evening, after finishing a presentation deck for the marketing group, Lena paused by a window overlooking the city lights. Her reflection, superimposed against the sparkling skyline, looked poised and self-assured. In quiet wonder, she recognized the internal shift. She wasn't the uncertain woman who once questioned her every move. New challenges undoubtedly lay ahead. Corporate life was never short on trials, but she faced them now with eyes open, brimming with confidence. She allowed herself a small smile. Sullivan Holdings was no longer just a place of trial by fire. It was where she'd been forced to discover her own capabilities. And as she gathered her belongings to head home, she felt an undercurrent of excitement. There was still a journey ahead, a long one. But with each step, she was learning not just how to keep up with the pace, but how to set it. The announcement came down swiftly. Sullivan Holdings would host a high-profile investor showcase in just 2 weeks, aiming to present new initiatives and secure additional funding. For many, it felt like a bigger challenge than the previous event. Although Lena had proven her resourcefulness once, this occasion carried higher stakes and grander expectations. Preparations began immediately, filling the corridors with the hum of urgency and excitement. In the flurry of planning sessions and budget proposals, Lena found herself increasingly at the heart of the action. Ryan and Trevor included her in briefings as they mapped out the day's agenda. A keynote speech from Ryan, breakout discussions with department heads, and an evening reception featuring top executives and potential partners. Lena's tasks ranged from booking the auditorium in a top Manhattan hotel to coordinating speaker schedules, each responsibility layered with the potential for disaster if overlooked. Despite lingering tension in her history with Trevor, they managed an uneasy truce. He remained formal and cool, but he no longer questioned her every move. Ava and Julie teased that Lena had earned battle scars from prior challenges, which gave Trevor no choice but to respect her. Meanwhile, Nancy hovered like a watchful guardian, reminding Lena to breathe amid the chaos. Weeks of planning culminated on a crisp Monday, the day of the showcase. The sun had barely risen when Lena arrived at the gleaming hotel ballroom. Crews arranged chairs in precise rows, tested microphones, and readied digital displays. She checked in with the tech team, verifying that all slides were loaded. Tension zipped through her body as she pictured the hundreds of eyes that would soon fill the space. By mid-morning, attendees began trickling in. Investors in tailored suits, financial analysts toting laptops, curious tech scouts hoping to spot the next big breakthrough. Lena stationed herself near the registration table, greeting people, answering questions, and directing them to coffee or seating. She felt that familiar swirl of excitement and nerves. Her name tag read Lena Russell, Event Coordinator, a title Ryan had quietly insisted upon. Seeing it made her chest warm with pride. Just before the first session, Ryan gathered the core team in a side hallway. His usual composed demeanor had an edge of anticipation. "We have key prospects attending," he reminded them. "If we impress them, we can secure partnerships that'll elevate our next phase of growth." His gaze landed on Lena. "Everyone here contributed. Don't forget that. Let's make this a success together." Lena's pulse quickened as the clock struck the hour. Lights dimmed, and an introductory video played on a massive screen. When it ended, Ryan stepped onto the small stage at the front of the ballroom. Applause rippled through the audience. He launched into a confident address on Sullivan Holdings' current projects, weaving in personal anecdotes about industry insights. From her vantage at the side, Lena spotted Trevor scribbling on his notepad, presumably tracking the numbers Ryan cited. Meanwhile, Nancy watched everything with calm satisfaction. Then, halfway through the presentation, Lena's heart jolted. Standing near the entrance was Victor Harding, her former boss, the man who once dismissed her as unambitious and expendable. His eyes roamed the packed room before settling on Lena. She stiffened, 1,000 old insecurities rushing back. What was he doing here? She recalled rumors that Harding's firm had interest in property development Sullivan Holdings was pursuing. Harding meandered into the crowd, wearing a smug expression. Lena tried to refocus on Ryan's speech, but she felt Harding's gaze on her, as if challenging her new status. She forced herself to stand taller, reminding herself this was not the timid Lena who used to cower at his office door. In this grand setting, she was no longer the subordinate he could belittle. When Ryan concluded, the audience erupted in enthusiastic clapping. As he stepped off stage, meeting Trevor and other department heads for a brief exchange, Lena spotted Harding weaving through the departing audience. Her skin prickled. Was he about to confront her? Or Ryan? The morning session transitioned into breakout groups. Attendees milled around the ballroom, exchanging business cards and ideas. Lena took a moment to inhale, steadying her composure. No matter Harding's intentions, she intended to remain focused on her role. She was, quite literally, at the center of all eyes, and she refused to let the past overshadow the woman she'd become. As the morning breakout sessions wrapped up, the air buzzed with lively conversations about growth strategies and partnership opportunities. Lena double-checked the schedule on her tablet, relieved that everyone seemed to be in the correct rooms at the correct times. Even a few minor tech hiccups, like a static-ridden microphone, had been ironed out swiftly. Ryan's keynote had gone well, drawing compliments from many investors. Lena heard a few praising his straightforward approach and the clarity of Sullivan Holdings' plans. Trevor, despite his reserved nature, conceded that the day's events were running smoothly, though he credited the whole team's effort. Lena took it as a step forward. During lunch, the buzz in the main foyer turned more casual. People grabbed plates of catered food, forming clusters to chat informally. Lena took the chance to slip behind a decorative partition, away from the crowds, to catch her breath. She was content letting them network, while she kept an eye on logistical details from a safe vantage point. Just as she was checking a text from Nancy, something about verifying a last-minute speaker change, she felt a presence behind her. Whirling around, she came face to face with Victor Harding. Her stomach lurched at the arrogant tilt of his chin and the slight curl of his lips. "Congratulations," he said, voice dripping with condescension. "Your little show is quite polished." He glanced around, as if unimpressed by the gleaming decor. "I see you've moved up in the world," Lena inhaled, steadying herself. "I have. Is there something you need?" He shrugged, stepping closer. "Just came to see how this operation runs. Heard Sullivan Holdings is in the market for property expansions. My firm might be involved." His eyes flicked to her name tag. "Event coordinator, huh? Well, that's a leap from filing paperwork in my back office." She bristled at the jab, recalling how he once criticized her for even the slightest error. "People grow, Mr. Harding," she replied evenly, refusing to look away. "Or maybe you haven't noticed." He smirked. "I'll be speaking to your CFO soon about potential deals. I'll keep an eye on how you handle all this. Let's see if you can handle the real pressure or if you'll fold like old times." With that, he sauntered off, leaving her fighting a wave of anger and a ripple of lingering self-doubt. Her mind spun. She worried he might attempt to undermine her standing with Trevor or Ryan. Yet she also reminded herself that she'd faced far bigger storms than Harding's cheap shots. Resolving not to let him rattle her, she rejoined the bustling foyer, checking that coffee stations were stocked and verifying the next panel's start time. Soon after, Nancy approached with a knowing look. "You all right?" she asked gently, as though sensing Lena's tension. When Lena nodded with forced calm, Nancy squeezed her arm. "Remember, no one here can diminish your achievements, certainly not a man from your past." Her words rekindled Lena's resolve. The afternoon sessions flowed smoothly, and the final presentation, an innovation panel led by Ava, drew wide interest. As the event neared its close, Ryan delivered concluding remarks, his voice echoing in the vast hall. Applause thundered when he finished, many attendees beaming with new confidence in the company's direction. Afterward, staff members breathed collective sighs of relief. The day's schedule had unfolded with minimal hitches. Investors lingered for the reception, nibbling on hors d'oeuvres and sipping sparkling water or wine. Standing near a tall window, Lena savored the sight of people genuinely impressed with Sullivan Holdings' future. Ryan wandered over, hands tucked in his pockets. "Thank you for your hard work," he said, low enough that only she could hear. "If this day was a success, you played a big part." Lena managed a proud smile. "I just did my job." His gaze softened. "Sometimes it's more than a job. Sometimes it's personal passion that makes all the difference. Don't forget that." With a slight tilt of his head, he excused himself to speak with another executive, leaving Lena's heart thumping from the praise. When the last of the guests departed, lights dimmed and the staff began dismantling displays. Lena helped gather stray brochures and stack chairs, exhaustion creeping into her limbs. Yet a sense of triumph steadied her. Yes, Harding's shadow had momentarily spooked her, but it didn't overshadow the accomplishments of the day. As she wheeled a cart of supplies back to storage, her thoughts lingered on Ryan's words. Sometimes it's more than a job. And maybe that explained why her heart felt so light even after such an exhausting storm of responsibilities. The days after the investor showcase flew by in a flurry of congratulatory emails, follow-up meetings, and cautious optimism. More than one director praised Lena's coordination, and even Trevor acknowledged that she kept potential pitfalls at bay. Soon, word spread about how the accidental new hire had become an indispensable organizer. Some found it inspiring, others seemed incredulous. Lena caught wind of both reactions, but chose to focus on the positive. She also noticed how her relationship with Ryan shifted subtly. Their exchanges, though still professional, carried a natural warmth. He'd casually ask how she was holding up, or whether she had time for a short debrief at the end of a long day. Sometimes his questions felt almost personal, like he was checking on her well-being, not just her job performance. She tried not to read too much into it, but an undeniable spark lingered under their conversations. One afternoon, Lena was summoned to a departmental meeting about streamlining event planning procedures. She arrived to find a few department heads assembled with Trevor at the front. As she took a seat, she noticed a quiet hush. Trevor nodded at her. "Ms. Russell, thanks for joining. We'd like your input on how to replicate the success of our recent events. You've been in the thick of it." Her stomach fluttered. Rarely had Trevor invited her input so openly. She cleared her throat and shared her thoughts on vendor communication, scheduling strategies, and team coordination. By the time she finished, some colleagues jotted notes, while others nodded in agreement. A flicker of pride warmed her chest. Not long ago, she had felt overshadowed in these corporate circles. Now, her voice carried weight. After the meeting, a few junior employees approached, asking if Lena would be willing to give them pointers on organizing complex projects. She blinked in surprise. She was used to being the one seeking help, not dispensing it. "Of course," she agreed, still marveling at how roles could shift. In the days that followed, she set up an informal lunch and learn for staff curious about event coordination and vendor relations. As she spoke before a small group in a bright conference room, a sense of déjà vu washed over her. She recalled that first day when Nancy gave her a warm welcome, providing tips on how to thrive at Sullivan Holdings. Now, Lena stood in a mentor role, encouraging novices who felt as uncertain as she once did. Outside of work, Maggie teased her gently. "You're practically a manager in all but title," she said over a Friday night phone call. "Think about how far you've come from scanning the job ads every morning, desperate for a decent paycheck." Lena allowed herself a soft laugh. She reflected on her cramped kitchen in Queens, the place that once felt like an inescapable reminder of her limitations. "I might still be in that apartment," she told Maggie, "but I don't feel trapped anymore. My view of life is so different now, As Lena grew more confident, she also felt an urge to pay forward the kindnesses she'd received. She often checked on new hires, answering small questions or guiding them through office protocols. Nancy watched with a proud smile. "You're making a bigger difference than you realize," Nancy would say, patting Lena's shoulder. "Keep it up, dear." Still, the trace of transformation extended beyond the office. She found her own boundaries shifting. She was less apologetic, more assertive when clarifying her needs or ideas. The memory of her old boss's sneer no longer loomed as large. Harding had failed to shake her at the investor showcase. And as for Trevor, while he remained formal, he seemed to have backed off his skepticism. Late one evening, as Lena wrapped up a final email to a potential sponsor, Ryan approached her desk. The office was mostly empty, lights dimmed. A faint sense of camaraderie hummed between them in the silence. "I've seen the way people look to you now," he said quietly, leaning against a nearby cubicle wall. "It's impressive, watching you evolve from someone who accidentally entered my office to a figure so many trust." She felt a flush rise in her cheeks. "I still have a lot to learn," she replied gently. Ryan gave a thoughtful nod. "We all do, but it's not just about learning. It's about the heart you bring to the job. That's what changes an organization and the people in it." A wave of gratitude and something else, an undefined tenderness, washed over Lena. She bid him a good night, heading to the elevator with renewed conviction. Indeed, she was no longer the frightened applicant who stumbled into the CEO's domain. She was someone who'd found her footing, and the trace of that transformation followed her wherever she went. Late on a Wednesday, Lena received a call from Ryan's assistant, Camilla Patterson, asking if Lena could join Ryan for a casual off-site meeting that evening. At first, Lena's thoughts buzzed with questions. Was this a standard after-hours appointment with a vendor, or something else? She hesitated, but curiosity outweighed her doubts. After wrapping up her tasks, she took a taxi to a modest, yet elegant restaurant near Bryant Park. Upon arrival, she was led to a quiet corner table lit by a soft overhead lamp. Ryan stood to greet her, his expression gentler than the typical corporate polish he showed in the office. "Thanks for coming," he said, motioning for her to sit. "I've been meaning to talk with you about a new project, something beyond standard events. But first," he signaled a waiter, who swiftly brought 2 glasses of sparkling water. Lena studied him, uncertain. "You could have just discussed it tomorrow at the office," she ventured softly. Ryan exhaled, looking momentarily vulnerable. "I suppose so. But I wanted a more relaxed setting. Sometimes the skyscraper walls make everything feel so formal." His gaze lingered on her, and Lena felt her pulse quicken. Was it possible this meeting was about more than just work? She tried to quell the flutter in her chest. She recalled the subtle warmth in their previous interactions, small glances, unspoken kindness. Maybe this dinner marked a turn in their relationship. Yet she also realized that such closeness could lead to complications. She recalled how power imbalances in a workplace romance often invited gossip and hostility. Was she ready for that? Ryan explained his concept, a community outreach initiative that Sullivan Holdings would sponsor, supporting underprivileged adults in job training and placement. "I'd like you to help coordinate with local organizations," he said. "You've shown a knack for bridging gaps. I believe you'd handle the human side well, listening, organizing, empathizing." The idea lit up Lena's eyes. "That sounds meaningful," she said, leaning forward. "I'd be honored to be involved." They spoke for nearly an hour, discussing potential partners, budget allocations, and ways to measure impact. In the lull between courses, Ryan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, sighed softly, and silenced it. Trevor's in negotiation mode again, he said wryly. I'll handle that later. When dessert arrived, a shared slice of cheesecake, Ryan shifted the conversation to more personal ground. I realize we've been operating in a swirl of deadlines, he began, voice low. But how are you, really, Lena? You've carried so much on your shoulders. Do you find any time to rest, or even just to dream? She flushed, surprised by the intimacy of the question. I'm doing okay. Sometimes I'm exhausted, but I'm excited to be part of something bigger. I never imagined I'd have the chance to shape projects like these. She paused, biting her lip. Though, yes, it's a lot. And I wonder if people assume I only got here by accident, or because she nearly stumbled over her words, worried about implying favoritism. Ryan's eyes softened with understanding. I know how it looks from the outside, but your work ethic and heart are what brought you here, not a fluke elevator mishap. Don't discount what you bring. Silence settled over the table. Lena inhaled, feeling a sudden urge to speak her own truth. Sometimes I can't help wondering if I should keep this strictly professional, she said, her voice trembling. I sense something beyond work between us, but it scares me. His gaze lingered, filled with a warmth that made her chest tighten. I wouldn't want you to feel pressured, he said softly. I've never had a rule against dating in the office, but I understand the concerns. We could take it slow. Or step away from this line entirely, if that's what you need. Her heart pounded. The vulnerability in his words caught her off guard. She realized that behind his poised exterior was a man wrestling with his own doubts. She'd spent so long fighting for a place here, building credibility and forging alliances. Would a personal entanglement jeopardize everything? She swallowed hard. Ryan, I'm not saying no. I just want to be certain I can handle it. Before it's too late and things get complicated. A soft smile curved his lips. I appreciate your honesty. Let's keep talking. Like this. We'll figure it out together. They paid the bill, stepping out into the cool New York night. The city lights gleamed against the dark sky, and Lena felt that same swirl of possibility that had carried her these past months. In the gentle glow of street lamps, she and Ryan walked side by side, leaving unspoken promises in the silent spaces between their words. 2 days after her dinner with Ryan, Sullivan Holdings hosted a celebratory gathering for employees to recognize the quarter's achievements. The atmosphere was more casual than most corporate events. No outside investors, just staff enjoying drinks, music, and heartfelt speeches from department leaders. Large banners congratulated teams on record-high profits and lauded successful partnerships signed in recent weeks. The function took place in a spacious event hall inside the Sullivan Holdings Tower. Balloons and tasteful decorations replaced the usual professional decor, and an upbeat playlist filled the background. Lena arrived early to help Nancy set up refreshments. Julie and Ava zipped around, adding final touches to the table centerpieces. Everyone's spirits seemed high, at least until Trevor approached the microphone to officially kick things off. He cleared his throat, scanning the crowd. We've had an extraordinary quarter, he declared, his voice still carrying that no-nonsense edge. Profits are up and new ventures are taking shape. I'd like to thank every department for stepping up. A short pause lingered before he added, I'd also like to acknowledge the contributions of new team members who've quickly proven their value. You know who you are. Though not effusive, it was the closest thing to open praise Lena had ever heard Trevor give. She felt a small thrill run through her. Others nudged her playfully, as if to say, he's talking about you. Ryan followed next, stepping forward with an easy smile. You've all seen the positive numbers, now let's celebrate the people behind them. His gaze flicked over to Lena. For a moment, she felt an undercurrent of warmth, remembering their private conversation. Each of you has been vital, from longtime veterans to recent hires who jumped in with both feet. Tonight's about acknowledging that unity." Applause filled the hall, and the music resumed. Clusters of employees mingled, laughing and reminiscing about stressful deadlines turned triumphant. A few recognized Lena from her investor events coordination and peppered her with questions about how she'd pulled it off. She answered modestly, still not entirely used to the spotlight. Soon she wandered to the side, finding a quieter corner where she could watch the festivities. Nancy joined her, gently linking arms. "You see how far you've come, dear," she said, voice brimming with pride. "Not so long ago, you were second-guessing your place here. Now, you're part of the heart and soul of this team." Lena felt a swell of gratitude. Before she could reply, movement by the elevator caught her eye. A man stepped out, Victor Harding, looking uninvited and out of place. Her stomach knotted. Did he come to cause trouble, or was he here on some last-minute business matter? Either way, his presence felt like a dark cloud drifting into a sunny celebration. Harding spotted her and advanced with a smug smile. "Quite a party," he commented dryly, looking around the hall. "But let's see if you're really as indispensable as everyone claims." Nancy stiffened beside Lena, eyes narrowing. "This is a private gathering," she said firmly. "If you need to speak with someone, it can wait until office hours, Mr. Harding." He ignored her, locking his gaze on Lena. "I've been talking with your CFO about possible property ventures. Thought I'd drop by, see the faces behind the emails." Harding leaned in slightly. "You've come a long way from the timid clerk I knew. Still, I'm not convinced you can handle bigger responsibilities without—" Just then, Ryan approached, having noticed the tension. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, tone polite but laced with authority. Harding's smirk barely wavered. "No problem. I was just reminding Miss Russell that big fish sometimes swallow the small ones in these ventures. Or maybe you prefer to keep her safe in a cozy corner of the company." Lena's pulse pounded. She saw Ryan's jaw tighten, but he remained calm. "Lena doesn't need my protection," he said coolly. "She's proven quite capable of handling her own. If you're questioning that, perhaps you haven't followed our recent successes." Harding scoffed. "We'll see how capable she is when negotiations get tough." He cast Lena one last disdainful glance before turning on his heel. As quickly as he'd appeared, he vanished back into the elevator. Silence hovered for a moment. Nancy exhaled, tension melting from her frame. Ryan looked at Lena, who met his gaze with a steady calm. The old version of her might have shrunk under Harding's bullying. Now, she felt something akin to triumph, not a flashy victory, but the quiet confidence of knowing she was no longer the person he once tormented. "Are you all right?" Ryan asked softly. She nodded. "I am. It just reminds me. Victory isn't about a single trophy or someone's approval. It's about realizing you can stand your ground against doubts, yours or someone else's." Ryan's eyes gleamed with respect. "Well said." They stepped away together, rejoining the festive crowd. Music swirled around them. Colleagues toasted each other with laughter and bright smiles. Lena noticed how different the world looked now, how Harding's negative presence barely made a dent in her sense of belonging. She understood that her real victory went beyond accolades and investor praise. It was the realization that, no matter how others tried to measure her worth, she held the power to define it herself. On a sunny Saturday morning, Lena found herself standing outside the old apartment building where she used to live. In her hand, she clutched a small box of homemade cookies meant for Pam, her former neighbor who once offered her friendly advice and a comforting meal. A swirl of nostalgia wove through her chest. She remembered the cramped stairwell, the flickering hallway light, and her own defeated footsteps as she came home from frustrating job hunts. Today, the building's tired facade didn't fill her with the same despair it once had. Instead, she saw it as a starting point, a place where she'd once felt stuck, yet now visited with renewed confidence. She climbed the worn stairs and knocked on Pam's door. Moments later, a familiar, welcoming face peered out. "Lena!" Pam exclaimed, arms open for a hug. She was in her early 60s, wearing a floral apron, and carried the same warmth Lena recalled. "Heard rumors you got yourself a big-deal corporate job. Come in, tell me everything." Stepping into the small living room, Lena felt memories flood back. The chipped coffee table, the crocheted blankets. She handed over the box of cookies, and Pam set out 2 mugs for coffee. "I can't believe it's been so long since you visited. You used to drag yourself up those stairs feeling hopeless." Lena's gaze drifted to the window, where a faint view of the bustling Queen Street shimmered in the daylight. "I was hopeless," she admitted softly, "but things changed. I found a place where I could prove myself, and I did." Sipping their coffee, Lena recapped her whirlwind journey, stumbling into Ryan Sullivan's office by mistake, landing an administrative role, facing suspicion from the CFO, and orchestrating major events that could have easily collapsed but didn't. She glossed over the complexities of her growing bond with Ryan, but her tone revealed pride and, underneath it all, a new sense of joy. Pam's eyes glistened. "I always knew you were too determined to stay down forever," she said. "You're smiling in a way I've never seen you smile before. Must be more than just a good paycheck." A subtle flush crept into Lena's cheeks. She thought of Ryan, their private talks, the gentle admissions of feeling something deeper than mere professional respect. Despite her lingering caution, the thought of him still sparked a glow in her heart. "I've learned a lot about letting myself be happy," she said, carefully choosing her words. "Part of that means accepting that I deserve good things, even love, maybe." Pam patted her hand. "Don't let fear stop you. You've already climbed out of a tight spot once. Trust your instincts." After they finished their coffee, Lena rose to leave. They exchanged a tight embrace, and she promised she'd visit again soon. Descending the stairs, she gazed over her shoulder. The place that once epitomized her sense of limitation no longer cast a shadow on her future. She was returning as a new person, one who carried hard-won self-belief. When she stepped back into the spring sunshine, her phone buzzed. A text from Maggie. "Don't forget our lunch with Ethan tomorrow. He's so eager to see you." Lena smiled, remembering how her nephew peppered her with endless questions about her fancy job. She tapped a quick reply, reaffirming their plans. Crossing the busy street, Lena felt a profound sense of peace. In returning to this part of her past, she recognized how far she'd come. The trembling insecurities that once defined her had been replaced by a steady conviction. She still had challenges ahead. There would always be new corporate hurdles, investor events, and that lingering tension with Trevor. But inside, she felt reborn. Every step echoed with quiet confidence, telling her she was free from the heavy shackles of self-doubt. In the distance, Manhattan's skyline rose, a towering reminder of her new life. Lena lifted her eyes to the skyscrapers with a small grin, as if silently accepting a personal invitation to keep going. Yes, she was a different person now, a woman who had discovered her own strength and worth, and there was no turning back. Back at Sullivan Holdings, Monday morning arrived with the usual bustle. Employees filled the hallways, carrying coffee cups and laptops, discussing project deadlines in hurried tones. Yet something felt different to Lena. She didn't walk in with a tight stomach or a sensation of being an outsider. Instead, she strode through the lobby with a calm self-assurance. From her new desk, a slightly larger workstation near the project management team, she could see Nancy chatting amiably with a junior hire. Lena remembered how she'd once been that new employee, gazing wide-eyed at polished floors and glossy walls. Now, she felt integrated into the fabric of the company, part of its pulse and purpose. Shortly after she settled, Trevor arrived with a stack of documents. He wore his trademark serious expression, but there was a trace of respect in his gaze. "Lena," he began, placing the papers on her desk, "I'll need your assistance coordinating timelines for the new property development pitch. We have a quick turnaround." She examined the documents, noticing how seamlessly he involved her in high-level tasks now. "I'm on it," she said with a nod, refraining from adding unnecessary apologies or disclaimers. She'd grown beyond that. Midway through the morning, Ryan's assistant, Camilla, approached with a carefully worded email. "Ryan wants you in the departmental meeting at 10, she said, scanning her notes. "They're discussing cross-collaboration for the community outreach project. He asked that you lead the portion on vendor relations." Lena's pulse picked up in excitement. The community outreach initiative had become her passion project. She spent evenings researching local non-profits, drafting proposals on how Sullivan Holdings could fund training sessions or job fairs for vulnerable groups. The chance to present her vision to department heads felt like a milestone. At 10 sharp, she entered the glass-walled conference room. Figures in suits and pencil skirts lined the table, each glancing at projected slides. Ryan sat at the head, but he wore a welcoming smile that put Lena at ease. With measured confidence, she explained how forging stronger ties with community organizations could elevate Sullivan Holdings beyond mere profit. She outlined potential timelines, resource needs, and realistic goals. When she finished, a brief silence hung in the air, then a wave of nods and a few thoughtful questions. Even Trevor asked about budget allocations, not out of scorn, but genuine curiosity. The exchange ended with a consensus that Lena would develop a more detailed plan for final sign-off. After the meeting, Ryan lingered as the others filed out. His voice dropped to a private murmur. "You did great in there. It's clear you've done your research." A faint smile curved Lena's lips. "I care about it. It's not just an assignment. It feels like something that matters." His eyes lit with admiration. "You're making a difference here, Lena, in ways you probably don't fully see yet. Keep going." She felt a wave of warmth at his encouragement. They parted as colleagues, but the undercurrent of something more still lingered, an unspoken connection that existed between official agendas and silent glances. That afternoon, Lena helped the marketing team with a brief campaign design. While working side by side, Ava turned to her. "So, rumor has it you're stepping into bigger shoes soon. Think you'll accept a more managerial role if they offer?" Lena's breath caught. The thought of rising to a leadership position was thrilling and a bit intimidating. "I might," she said. "I mean, I want to keep growing. If Sullivan Holdings sees value in me at that level, I won't turn it down." Ava beamed. "That's the spirit." By day's end, Lena felt the swirl of new responsibilities pressing in on her. Yet instead of dread, she sensed a quiet excitement. The reality she returned to each morning wasn't the cold, imposing corporate machine it once appeared to be. It was a place where she could truly contribute, learn, and guide others. Packing up, she spotted a quick text from Maggie, asking about dinner plans next weekend. A simple note, but it made her smile. The best transformations, she realized, were the ones that bridged her old life and her new one, a sign that she hadn't lost herself, but rather discovered a fuller version of who she was meant to be. At the start of a fresh week, Lena noticed an email from HR in her inbox. "New employee orientation, guest speaker needed." Curious, she clicked to find a note requesting someone to share experiences with incoming staff, covering practical tips and personal insights on thriving at Sullivan Holdings. Nancy wandered by as Lena read. "You should volunteer," Nancy said, her tone inviting no argument. "Your story would resonate with those new hires. Show them they don't need to be perfect from day one to succeed." Lena's stomach flipped, but a spark of excitement took root. She recalled how mentors like Nancy had guided her, how Julie and Ava's camaraderie helped her survive the early weeks. Maybe now it was her turn to pay it forward. Without overthinking, she wrote back, "I'd love to be part of the session." A few days later, Lena stood before a small auditorium of fresh faces. The new employees, about a dozen of them, ranged from wide-eyed interns to seasoned professionals switching industries. Some carried nerves in their stiff postures, others tried to mask it behind confident smiles. Lena herself recalled that very feeling, stepping into unknown territory, not sure if she truly belonged. The lights dimmed slightly as Lena took the microphone. Her heart fluttered, but she projected the calm voice she'd developed during countless investor events. "Good morning," she began. "I'm Lena Russell, and I started at Sullivan Holdings not too long ago. Maybe I was as uncertain as some of you are now, maybe even more." She then recounted her unexpected start, the elevator mistake that landed her in the CEO's office, the initial confusion, and the slow process of proving herself day by day. She shared candid moments, staying late to fix a scheduling error, facing departmental politics, and learning to push through self-doubt. "I made plenty of mistakes," she admitted, "but each one taught me something new, and each time I found allies who helped me along." One of the new hires raised a hand. "How did you handle the pressure of big events so early on?" he asked, voice quivering slightly. "I'm feeling overwhelmed already." Lena offered a reassuring smile. "I won't lie. There were times I felt lost. But I learned two critical things. Ask for help early, and remember that no one expects you to be perfect on day one. The best employees here are the ones who build supportive relationships, who own up to mistakes and fix them." She paused, glancing at the front row where Nancy sat, smiling encouragingly. "And if you find yourself in doubt, look around. Someone's probably been in your shoes and can guide you. This place can be high pressure, but it can also be incredibly rewarding if you invest in genuine connections." When the Q&A ended, applause filled the small space. A few newcomers approached to thank her personally, explaining how her honesty eased their anxieties. One woman, who had moved from a small town, confided that she worried she'd never fit into a big corporation. Lena reassured her that tenacity and humility could bridge that gap. After the session, Nancy embraced Lena in a quick hug. "You were wonderful," she whispered. "I hope you see how your story inspires others. That's the power of sharing wisdom." Leaving the auditorium, Lena felt a joyful rush. She walked the corridors with a sense of lightness, passing by colleagues who now greeted her as more than just another face. She recalled the first uncertain days when even Camilla's polite efficiency felt intimidating. Now, Camilla sometimes sought out Lena's opinion on office protocols. On her way back to her desk, Lena spotted Ryan standing near the large glass window overlooking the city. He motioned her over. "Heard about your talk," he said, his tone warm. "I'm glad you could share that perspective." Sometimes, new hires need a dose of real-world reassurance. A flicker of something deeper passed between them, recalling the dinner conversation where they discussed personal boundaries and potential risks of mixing work and feelings. Lena felt that gentle flutter again. "It was a good reminder for me too," she said. "Sharing those memories made me appreciate how far we've come." He met her gaze with a quiet smile. "There's more to come, Lena. For both of us." She swallowed, a tender ache stirring inside. Though neither spoke openly of romance, the possibility glimmered in every unspoken pause. With a soft nod, she headed back to her desk, heart uplifted by the knowledge that her journey could light the path for others. Indeed, the best part of wisdom, she realized, wasn't hoarding it, but handing it on to those who needed it most. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow on the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ryan's penthouse, where he had invited Lena for a private dinner. Weeks had passed since their tentative conversation about navigating personal feelings amid corporate life. They'd kept things professional in the office, but behind that, a growing closeness took root through casual texts, small gestures, and unspoken understanding. Tonight, Lena arrived feeling both excited and anxious. She wore a simple yet elegant black dress, reminding herself to breathe normally. The private elevator whooshed open to reveal a sleek living room with minimalist decor, a far cry from her old Queen's apartment. Ryan greeted her with a fond smile, offering a gentle hug that hinted at how the evening might unfold. Over a candle-lit table set with polished silverware, they exchanged polite updates about work. Ryan mentioned upcoming negotiations, and Lena described progress on the community outreach project. But as dinner went on, their conversation veered into more intimate territory, favorite childhood memories, personal ambitions beyond the company walls, what home meant to each of them. At one point, Ryan set his glass down and leaned forward, sincerity shining in his eyes. "You know," he began, voice hushed, "I never thought I'd say this, but hiring you, accidentally or not, was one of the best decisions this company has ever made, and not just because of your work ethic." Lena's cheeks warmed. "Sometimes I still can't believe how it all started. Me stumbling into your office, babbling about a receptionist interview." He chuckled softly. "Fate takes odd turns. But let's be real. We both did the work to make it more than a fluke. And now here we are, about to—" He paused, searching her eyes. "I'd like to build something real with you, Lena, if you feel the same." Her heart pounded. She thought of every trial she'd faced. The rejections before Sullivan Holdings, the humiliation under Harding's rule, the initial clash with Trevor, and the nights she stayed awake questioning whether she had any future here. All of it had led to this moment, the possibility of love with a man who saw her worth without diminishing her independence. "I want that too," she whispered, a lump in her throat. "I've been afraid to jeopardize everything I've worked for, or to face other people's judgments, but I don't want fear to hold me back, not anymore." His eyes flickered with relief and emotion. Without another word, he reached across the table, fingers interlacing with hers. They stayed like that for a moment, letting the quiet hush of the penthouse envelop them. After dinner, they moved to a cozy corner of the living area, sipping tea and sharing stories about the strangest meetings they'd endured at work. Laughter eased whatever nervous tension remained. With every shared memory, they deepened their bond, a far cry from the boundaries that had once separated CEO and new hire. Eventually, Lena rose to gaze at the sweeping Manhattan skyline through the massive windows. Ryan joined her, slipping an arm gently around her waist. She thought of the wrong door she had pressed in the elevator all those months ago, the chance twist that had brought her to Ryan's domain. Standing here now, with the city lights shimmering below, she felt the magnitude of how life could change through a single bold step. Her phone buzzed quietly, a text from Maggie reading, "Hope it's going well. You deserve happiness." Lena smiled, tucking the phone away. Yes, she did deserve it, and so did Ryan. They both had worn masks in different ways. He, the guarded CEO burdened by corporate responsibilities. She, the unsure newcomer shackled by old insecurities. But together, they'd found a space for honesty, growth, and genuine connection. Outside, the lights of New York pulsed like a living canvas. Ryan's voice brushed her ear. "Stay a while." Turning in his arms, Lena nodded, eyes brimming with emotion. She recalled the vow she'd made on her first day, to be true to herself, to work hard, and to remain open to new paths. The final piece of that vow now came into focus, a promise to allow herself to love and be loved. And so, in the hush of that penthouse high above the city streets, they sealed the journey that began with one misread elevator button. Lena Russell, once just a hopeful soul seeking a receptionist job, now stood beside Ryan Sullivan, the CEO whose heart she'd unexpectedly touched. Together, they looked beyond that wrong door and into a future shaped by faith, courage, and a love they dared to let grow. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.